Close your eyes and imagine the clubhouse after a loss that shouldn't have felt like this. Music playing, then silence when the captain turns it off. That moment, a tiny theatrical gesture, is the entire Mets season in micro. Flashes of swagger, then a sudden, uncomfortable quiet. This team came into Philadelphia with a chance. They leave with a 10-game hole in the division and a wild card margin that's suddenly paper thin. The scoreboard is blunt. 3 straight losses to the Phillies, 5 straight defeats overall, and a rotation that has frayed just as September's noise gets louder. But box scores don't tell the whole story. What's happening in Queens is both mechanical and psychological. A tangle of starting arms losing their grips, a bullpen that's been asked to do too much too often, and a clubhouse that sounds confident on the surface but is getting hollowed by recurring breakdowns. Let's start with the simplest, ugliest fact: starting pitching. The rotation looked like a solved problem in April and May, and that early success created a false sense of security. When you pay for stars, the expectation is durability and dominance. The reality this summer has been different: fatigue, inconsistency, and a string of starts that dig early holes. Since July 1st, the staff's ERA ballooned into the mid 4.0s. That's not a fluke, it's a trend. Young arms can surge and then stumble. Veterans can get hit by velocity decline or mechanics wear, and the end result is the same. The bullpen is soldered together more nights than it should be. Which brings us to the middle innings, where this team has repeatedly combusted. The Mets have leaned on high-leverage relievers for weeks now, and that usage pattern costs you 2 things: effectiveness and availability. Relievers are heroes until they aren't. The next month is a math problem in which a high workload now can become a shortage in October. Managerial moves, quick hooks, matchup chasing, bullpen shuffling, sometimes look reactive rather than prescriptive. That's not always a failure of decision-making. Often it's a symptom of having to cover up for starters not giving length. But the optics are ugly. Fans see names brought in and names who couldn't hold leads, and the narrative becomes, we can't get through a game. Then there's the offense and the intangible that lives beyond metrics: timing, chemistry, and a willingness to shoulder the ugly moments. This roster is stuffed with high-end bats and payroll heft, and that is exactly why the current malaise stings more. Talent buys you margin for error, except when it turns into complacency. You can't live off power alone when opposing pitchers exploit holes in the approach or when the lineup becomes top-heavy and predictable. The moments when the Mets have looked unmoored, poor situational hitting, missed fundamentals on defense, and failure to manufacture runs when the big swings don't fall, are as damaging as blown pitching spots. The coin flips the other way. Great pitching hides batting slumps. Great hitting hides pitching cracks. Right now, neither side is reliably doing the job. A lot of analysis will rush to trades or deadline panic. That's understandable. When you have ownership willing to spend, the instinct is to fix things immediately. But big payroll alone does not equate to a fix. Quick injections of talent can patch holes, yes, but they also create new problems: chemistry disruptions, payroll strangulation, and dead money in future years. If you're Steve Cohen, you can afford the risk. If you're a manager trying to hold a locker room together, you need solutions that stabilize now without wrecking the long view. So, what does stabilization look like practically? First, get the rotation into a predictable rhythm. That means clear roles, honest self-assessment, and a willingness to accept short-term pain for long-term gain. If a starter isn't giving length on a regular cadence, consider a soft skip, an extra off day, or a mechanical reset. Rookie hot streaks like Nolan McLean's are real assets, but you can't pitch him every 5th day and expect miracles. Balance innings, prioritize matchups, and protect the bullpen from repeated emergency usage. Second, rebuild the bullpen hierarchy. Identify 2 or 3 relievers who are the true high-leverage arms and let everyone else know their lane. Overmanagement is the enemy here. Relievers thrive with role clarity. Trust in your bridgemen and set up consistent sequences so that late innings are not a loom of panic. That might mean short-term exposure for some arms, but consistency breeds reliability. Third, tighten up the offensive approach. This isn't about firing coaches for sound bites. It's about replicable process. Create a daily checklist that re-emphasizes situational hitting, plate discipline, and small ball sequences when the long ball isn't working. Make priority plays easier, hit and run drills, second and short paint work, and a focus on metrics that produce runs without relying solely on homers. The Mets lineup is full of destructive potential. Convert that into repeatable at-bats. Fourth, address the psychology. A clubhouse that publicly claims confidence while privately fracturing creates dangerous cognitive dissonance. The nobody's happy line from Mendoza is honest and necessary, but it must be followed by visible, concrete steps. Short, focused meetings where leaders like Lindor and veterans outline small, fixable goals for the next homestand do more than speeches. Micro wins, clean innings, 2-out rallies, 1-run saves rebuild belief faster than any trade rumor. Fifth, be surgical in the market. If the front office is buying, buy what helps you survive September and October. A veteran starter who eats innings, a high-spin lefty who neutralizes key opposition bats, or a reliever with a proven late-inning track record. The team's needs are pragmatic: innings, strikeouts, and somebody who can erase middle-inning collapses. Avoid splashy bats that won't change the core problem: run prevention. There's also a structural reality to accept. Time is slipping. The schedule doesn't get easier. The Rangers, the Padres, these are gauntlet checks that will define the next 2 weeks. Each game is an opportunity to flip the narrative or to let the ship drift further. The Mets have talent and resources, those are advantages. But baseball in September rewards the teams who can play the small things clean, who can stabilize staff health, and who can keep the clubhouse temperature cool when the world outside is shouting. So what's the bottom line? This season will be remembered in 2 possible ways: a squandered, high-priced disappointment, or a dramatic late rewrite that cements the Mets as contenders again. The difference between those endings is not a single trade or a single start. It's a sequence of disciplined decisions about pitching workload, bullpen roles, offensive process, and a sober approach to upgrades, executed with leadership that matches the payroll. The silence in the clubhouse after that Phillies loss is not yet the final note. But to turn it into music again, the Mets have to stop expecting star power alone to rescue them and start rebuilding the game-by-game mechanics that win in autumn. If you want a line to carry into the next bar argument, talent buys you headlines, but process buys you October. The Mets can still buy their way back into contention, but only if they pair spending with surgical fixes and a relentless focus on the small things that create sustainable wins. Everything that could go wrong for the Mets seems to be happening at once. A 3-game sweep by the Phillies pushed New York 10 games back in the NL East and trimmed their wildcard cushion to just 2 games. And the clubhouse mood says it all. Nobody's happy. This isn't a brief slump. It's the 5th time this season. The Mets have dropped at least 4 straight, and the pattern's growing ugly. Pitching that looked like a strength earlier has frayed. Since July 1st, the rotation owns a 4.81 ERA, one of the worst marks in baseball over that stretch. Wednesday's loss was a microcosm: shaky starting pitching from Clay Holmes, a bullpen meltdown in the middle innings, and an offense that couldn't solve a locked-in opposing starter in Christopher Sanchez. Expectations were built on star power and payroll, and that only makes the current slide sting more. Francisco Lindor walked into the visiting clubhouse and flipped off the music. Manager Carlos Mendoza's terse, honest line, "Nobody's happy," summed up a room full of frustration. Talent is not the problem on paper. Execution and consistency are. Time is shrinking. The schedule to close the season is brutal. The red-hot Rangers visit Citi Field this weekend, complete with Jacob deGrom's return, followed by the Padres. Those games loom as potential season definers, not tune-ups. With just 27 games left, swing weeks like this can decide whether the Mets